Ever feel like your brain is just doing its own thing, making sense of the world in its own, well, quirky way?
Yeah, like it's got its own operating system or something.
Exactly. Well, get this, Stephen Wolfram might say that's not just a quirk, it's the very essence of how we experience reality.
And that's an intriguing thought.
It is. Today we're taking a deep dive into Wolfram's mind-bending work on observer theory.
Let's do it. Always up for a little mind bending.
You ready to have some assumptions challenged?
Absolutely. Wolfram's ideas are like a breath of fresh air in how we think about, well, ourselves and the universe.
Okay, so we've got a stack of Wolfram's recent writings here.
Let's see what's got him so fired up.
Right. And the central idea seems to be that we as observers, we're not just passively watching the universe unfold.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We're not just along for the ride then.
Nope. It's like we're actively creating our own versions of it.
So we're not just watching the movie, we're directing it too.
Exactly. It's like we're all starring in our own personal reality show.
And the director of that show, your observer.
Okay, so let's break this down. What does he even mean by observer? It sounds like he's talking about something beyond just, seeing with our eyes.
He is. Wolfram's talking about how our brains process information to actually make sense of the world.
So it's not just about what we're observing, but how we're observing it.
Exactly. It's about taking in all that raw data of the universe.
Which is a lot of data.
Right. And turning it into something meaningful, something our brains can actually handle.
Which, let's be honest, our brains aren't always that great at.
Think about it. You instantly recognize a friend's face in a crowd.
Okay, yeah.
That's your observer doing some seriously incredible computational work there. Sifting through visual data at, like, lightning speed.
It's like our brains are constantly running these super sophisticated algorithms in the background just to simplify the world around us.
Exactly. Wolfram calls this process equivalencing.
Equivalencing.
Yeah. It's how our observer takes this massive chaotic stream of information and chunks it into manageable pieces.
Otherwise, we'd just short circuit, right? Too much input.
Exactly. You don't see a chaotic jumble of molecules when you look at a glass of water, do you?
Thankfully, no. Last time I checked, at least.
You see a smooth, flowing liquid.
That's because I'm well hydrated.
Well, maybe, but that's your observer grouping those trillions of molecules together, equivalencing them, to create a simpler version of reality for you.
So it's not that the molecules aren't there. Our brains are just choosing to ignore them for the sake of efficiency. That's kind of wild when you think about it.
It is, and it's not just with things we see either. Think about how you understand a concept like a rock.
Okay, a rock.
There are countless variations in shape, color, texture.
Absolutely. Rocks are very diverse.
But your brain groups them all together into that one category.
Because it's efficient.
That's your conceptual observer, drawing boundaries and, making sense of the world.
You're making me look at rocks totally differently now. I'm going to have to reevaluate my relationship with rocks.
I think we all do.
But this is more than just categorization, right? This is about how we experience the world at, its most fundamental level.
You got it. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
You tell.
Wolfram argues that our observer's tendency to simplify, to create these equivalences, it isn't just happening in our heads.
Wait, really? You're blowing my mind right now.
He believes it's fundamental to how the universe itself works.
So how we perceive reality, that's a reflection of how reality actually is.
In a way, yeah. It's like our brains are miniature versions of the universe, reflecting the same processes that govern reality on a grand scale.
Hold on. So you're saying there's a connection between the way our brains make sense of things and, the fundamental structure of the universe. That's a pretty big claim.
It is. And this is where Wolfram introduces this mind-bending concept he calls the ruliad.
The ruliad. That sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel.
It does, doesn't it? But bear with me. This is where things get really good. Think of the ruliad like the cosmic code that underpins everything.
The source code for the entire universe.
The ultimate source code. And we're like, different programs running on it, each experiencing our own version of reality.
Okay, so the ruliad is like the big bang of information, the source of all the complexity in the universe. But if we're all just tapping into the same ruliad, why are our realities so different? I mean, shouldn't we all be seeing the same thing?
That's the question, isn't it? And it leads us to one of the most intriguing aspects of Wolfram's theory, I think. The idea that our observers, despite being connected to this universal source, are also limited in what they can perceive. It's like we each have our own little porthole into this vast ocean of the ruliad.
Okay.
But those portholes are different sizes, shaped by our unique experiences and perspectives.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture, but this is where my brain starts to short circuit a little, Like, we're talking about the fundamental nature of reality here. Does this mean there's no such thing as objective truth?
Hmm.
That it's all just, like, relative to your observer?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, boy.
Wolfram would say that even though our individual experiences are shaped by our observers,
Okay.
there are still certain fundamental truths woven into the very fabric of the ruliad.
So there's hope for objectivity after all. Like, maybe we haven't achieved perfect objectivity yet because we're still figuring out how to see past our own, subjective biases.
That's the gist of it. Think of it this way. Imagine a group of artists,
Okay.
each painting their own interpretation of a stunning sunset.
Yeah.
Their paintings will be different, right?
Yeah.
Based on their style, their chosen medium,
Sure.
even their mood that day.
Makes sense.
But they're all capturing the same essential elements. The light, the colors,
Right.
the way the sky meets the horizon.
So even though their perspectives are different, there's still an underlying reality, the actual sunset that they're all responding to.
Exactly. And Wolfram would argue that those universal elements, those fundamental truths, they're embedded in the structure of the ruliad itself.
It's like the ruliad sets the rules of the game, and our observers, with their limited perspectives, are trying to figure out how to play.
You got it. Now, here's where it gets really tricky.
Okay.
If those universal truths are already, baked into the ruliad,
Right.
why haven't we figured them all out yet? What's stopping us from cracking the cosmic code, so to speak?
Yeah, it's not like we're lacking for curious minds on this planet.
Wolfram would say that our own limitations as observers, there's still a major roadblock.
You're saying we're holding ourselves back.
In a way, yeah.
How so?
We're limited by the computational power of our brains.
Our brains can only handle so much, you're saying.
Exactly. And by the assumptions we bring to our observations.
Our preconceived notions.
Right. And even by the physical structure of our senses.
So, like, there might be entire dimensions of reality that our senses are just not equipped to pick up on.
It's a possibility, isn't it?
That's a pretty wild thought.
It is. It's like we're trying to understand a language we never even knew existed. And we're trying to do it using only the vocabulary we learned in kindergarten.
Yeah, that's not going to end well for us.
Not exactly.
So what can we do about it?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Oh.
Because Wolfram argues that our observer isn't just shaping our experience of the physical world.
You mean there's more?
There is. It's also influencing how we understand abstract concepts.
Abstract concepts. Like what?
Like math and language.
Wait, are you saying math isn't universal? My high school algebra teacher would like a word.
Now let's not get your algebra teacher too worked up.
They were very passionate about math. Still is, actually.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's not that math itself is subjective, but rather that our experience of it, our ability to grasp its complexities,
Right.
that's shaped by our observer.
Okay, I'm going to need you to unpack that one for me because math has always seemed like the one thing that's consistent, no matter what.
Yeah.
2 + 2 = 4, whether you're a human on Earth or a sentient mushroom on a planet orbiting a black hole.
That's a great point. And Wolfram wouldn't disagree with you there.
Okay, good.
But what he's suggesting is that even mathematics, at its most fundamental level, is ultimately part of the ruliad. He talks about something called a metamathematical universe.
A meta-mathematical universe. Now we're really going down the rabbit hole.
We are. But it's a fascinating rabbit hole. Think of it as this vast network of all possible axioms and theorems.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
And just like with physics, he argues that our limited perception as observers, it shapes which parts of that mathematical universe we can access.
So there might be entire branches of math out there, concepts so complex and mind-boggling that our brains simply can't even process them.
Exactly. It's a mind-blowing possibility.
It really is. It's like there's a whole secret level of math that we haven't even unlocked yet.
And it's not just limited to math either.
Oh no, what else?
Think about language. We use words to try to grasp this vast, nuanced universe of experience.
Words are pretty handy, I'll give you that.
They are. But those words are ultimately just simplified symbols, right?
I guess so. I've never really thought of them that way.
Little packets of information that our brains have learned to associate with something much bigger.
It's like we're trying to fit the entire Library of Congress into a tweet and then wondering why we can't quite grasp the full scope of human knowledge.
You're getting it. That process of condensing, of simplifying, of equivalencing.
Right, equivalencing. There's that word again.
That's our observer at work again.
Always up to something, that observer.
We're taking these amazingly complex ideas and experiences and stuffing them into these neat little boxes we call words, just so that we can communicate with each other,
Otherwise, we'd just be staring at each other blankly all the time.
pretty much.
But if that's the case, that means that everyone's internal dictionary is a little bit different, right? That
Exactly.
no two people have the exact same understanding of even a simple word like, tree or blue.
Now you're really getting to the heart of it. Our individual experiences, our cultures, our personal histories,
Right.
even our individual brain chemistry, all of it shapes the specific equivalences our brains make.
So in a way, we're all speaking slightly different languages,
Yes.
even when we're using the same words.
It's both fascinating and a little bit daunting, isn't it?
That explains a lot about those arguments with my partner. But seriously, this idea that our observers are shaping our reality, not just in physics, but in, like, math, language, everything.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. What assumptions are we making about the world that are just products of our limited observer perspective? Are we just trapped inside our own heads?
That is the million-dollar question.
Mm.
And Wolfram would argue that there are certain fundamental assumptions we make about ourselves and our place in the universe that profoundly shape our observations.
Like what?
Assumptions so ingrained, so seemingly obvious,
So obvious we don't even realize we're making them.
exactly, that we rarely even question them.
Okay, so we spent the last two parts of this deep dive exploring some seriously mind-bending ideas.
We have, haven't we? It's a lot to
Ah,
take in.
it is. We've talked about the ruliad, Wolfram's concept of the underlying, what was it, computational structure of the universe.
Right, like the universe is one giant computer program.
Exactly. And we've talked about how our observers, those little reality constructors in our brains,
Or not so little, depending on how you look at it.
right, shape our experience of, well, everything, even in ways we rarely stop to question. But if we're all running on different codes, so to speak, how can we ever hope to agree on anything if our experiences of reality are so subjective?
That's the crux of it, isn't it? But here's the thing. Wolfram doesn't think we're doomed to live in a world of complete subjectivity. He believes that by understanding the nature of our observers, we can actually get closer to a more, well, objective understanding of the universe.
Sure. Okay, I'm listening. Because right now, this all feels a bit like saying, hey, your brain is making stuff up, but don't worry, you can trust it to tell you what's real. It's a tough sell.
I hear you. It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? But stick with me on this. One of the biggest assumptions our observers make, Wolfram argues, is about our own persistence through time and space.
Our persistence, you mean like how we move through the world?
Exactly. We experience ourselves as, continuous beings,
Mhm.
moving through life in a straight line. But at a fundamental level, we're constantly changing.
You mean like how I can barely recognize myself in photos from high school? Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. Your body is literally made up of completely different atoms than it was back then.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. I mean, I knew atoms were constantly being replaced and all that.
Right. But we rarely stop to think about what that actually means.
It's like our bodies are constantly renewing themselves.
Exactly. And it's not just our physical bodies either. Your thoughts, your memories, even your sense of self,
You're messing with me now?
it's all evolving, shifting, like a river constantly changing its course.
But we don't experience ourselves that way.
We don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because our observer, it smooths out those changes, creating this illusion of a single persistent me.
So you're saying our sense of self, our feeling of being one continuous person, like throughout our entire lives, it's just a convenient fiction that our brains have cooked up.
It's one way to think about it, yeah.
That's both trippy and a little unsettling, to be honest.
It is a lot to process. It raises some pretty big questions. Like, where does this all leave our idea of free will? If our brains are essentially making things up as they go along, are we really in control of our choices? Or is it all just, predetermined by the code, so to speak?
Okay, now you're just messing with me. But seriously, if we take this observer theory seriously, it makes you question everything.
It does. It really makes you step back and look at the world with fresh eyes.
How do we even function if our experience of reality is so, like, fluid, so open to interpretation?
It's definitely a mind-bending concept. But for Wolfram, it all comes back to the ruliad. Remember, he believes this vast computational structure underpins everything.
Right, the cosmic code, the source of all creation.
And within that structure, he argues, there are certain fundamental truths, certain patterns and principles that govern how reality unfolds.
So it's like the ruliad is the cosmic symphony, and our observers are like individual instruments, each playing their own unique part,
I like that analogy.
but all contributing to the same overall composition.
Beautifully put. And by understanding the unique tuning of our own instruments, the specific biases and assumptions of our individual observers, we can start to hear the symphony more clearly, to appreciate the deeper harmonies beneath the surface variations.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. So if we can start to recognize those biases, those assumptions, those filters, we might actually unlock a deeper, more objective understanding of the universe.
Exactly. It's like we've been looking at the world through a kaleidoscope all this
A
time,
kaleidoscope.
marveling at the beautiful patterns, but not realizing that we're the ones holding the instrument, that we have the power to shift the patterns, to see things in a new way, just by changing our perspective.
That is a powerful image. So what you're saying is that Wolfram's observer theory isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It has practical implications for how we approach, well, everything, from scientific discovery to our own personal growth.
Absolutely. It challenges us to question our assumptions, to be more aware of the filters through which we experience the world.
And who knows what we might discover. If
Exactly.
we can start to see beyond those filters, to glimpse the universe as it truly is and all its, well, breathtaking complexity and wonder.
It's a journey worth taking, wouldn't you say?
It's a journey I'm ready to take. And on that note, I want to thank you, our expert, for guiding us on this incredible deep dive into Stephen Wolfram's observer theory. For those of you listening, we'll have links to Wolfram's work in the show notes if you want to explore these ideas further. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those observers busy.